Welcome to the Friday edition, Week 14, NFL. We've got a big show on deck. We've got a lot of exciting things to discuss in college because we have, of course, college conference championship weekend. We got some games tonight. We got some games tomorrow. We're going to be talking about games tonight and tomorrow with Ryan McCrystal, our college football expert, momentarily. We're also going to get a couple of best bets from Pamela Maldonado in the NFL realm. And then I'm going to be here, of course, as I always am, to showcase a couple of longest prop bets. I will warn you, though, one of these is not posted yet. So one of the ones that I have circled, we're going to have to see if it comes out over the course of the next hour, and then we can get on that. And of course, we've got our ref analyst, Joe Gibbs. You know, it's fascinating. Joe is so into the NFL refereeing kind of situation that he told me he doesn't love the card this week from an NFL reffing perspective. That's how deep Joe focuses on which refs have been selected and which games are they paired up with. When we're looking at the board as sports bettors and we're looking at the prop market and the matchups for certain players, we're looking at the ATS market and how certain teams are matching up from an injury perspective, from a scheme and strategy perspective with their opponent and what the market is suggesting. And then, of course, same thing from the totals perspective. So we like certain boards, we dislike certain boards. But with Joe, he's so into the refereeing. He's like, I don't know that I love the NFL refereeing card this week from a discussion perspective, but we're still going to get a couple of perspectives from Joe anyways. We appreciate seeing everybody here in the chat. Happy Friday to you, Tyler, Jason. Let's have a great weekend. Exile, Aaron, Barry, TGIF, everybody. Yes, Tyler, we did not bet Jahmyr Gibbs. He did get over his longest again last night. The books are jacking up that line, and it doesn't seem to matter for Jahmyr Gibbs. It looked for a while like it was tenuous, right? It did not look like it was going to be as easy as some of the past weeks was, and that's one of the reasons I was a little bit leery of actually firing it out to you guys as subscribers. But it was another cash for, I'm sure, a lot of you guys that just have it on repeat, right? Every single week. So love seeing you guys in the chat. A lot of different guys in here. So happy to see you, Ron. Happy to see you, Brett, Dominic. Reed did not hit. Of course, you were scared at half. My longest bets, Greenbelt Glass, longest bet saved your butt. So longest bets, look, what are we at right now? On longest bets, we are, and this is why I want to make sure that I'm getting one of these bets out to you that I do like, as opposed to giving you a second or third best bet. We are now 17-8 on this show for free. That's 68%, giving you a couple of bets per week on the longest bets. We are 7-1 over the last 4 weeks, giving you guys longest bets on this show. Obviously, all of them are free. We've got at least one coming up later in the show, and we'll see if they post the other one that I'm circling by the time we get to that point in the show. As always, you hear me calling out some of the guys, and we'll be answering some of the questions in the chat. If you want to participate with us and you're watching over on X, make sure you head over to YouTube. Sharp Football Analysis. Search us up, follow us, and subscribe and give us a thumbs up. But that's where I'm going to see all your messages and be able to interact with you a little bit over there. Before we get into Ryan and discussion of the conference championships, I've got a few things to say about the game last night. Let's get into it. So many of you guys got involved with us, whether you're not a client usually, during Free Week, which is a week that we give out bets and unleash everything for free. And we do that once a year. We had a great week when we did it this year. One of the bets that we gave out was the Green Bay Packers in the first half against the Chicago Bears. And we won that bet. And one of the reasons that we were on that bet, as I mentioned in the detailed write-up that I share with a lot of these bets, was the fact that the Green Bay Packers take the football. They tend to do that when they win the coin toss, and most every other team is deferring that toss, including the Chicago Bears. And as a result, the Green Bay Packers are very likely to start with the football. And it's hilarious to me that Dan Campbell basically started psychological warfare with Matt LaFleur and the Green Bay Packers a week ago, when the Detroit Lions won the toss on Thanksgiving against the Chicago Bears and took the football. And I think for some reason that got into the brain of Matt LaFleur, because he spontaneously combusted when the Green Bay Packers won the toss on Thursday night. Instead of having his player take the football, which I will go through, they won the toss in week 7. They took the football. They won the toss in week 8. They took the football. They won the toss in week 9. They took the football. Over their last 3 games since week 9, because they had one bye, they did not win the toss, and every single game their opponent deferred. So the Green Bay Packers have been starting, in fact, since week 5, the Packers have started with the football when that opening kickoff occurs every single game. There's not a single game since week 5 that the Green Bay Packers did not start with the football. And I want to play a clip of Matt LaFleur after the game and what his comments were.
I thought we just started, especially on the offensive side of the ball, too slow. I mean, we go punt, fumble, then we score a touchdown. So, it's only a handful of plays that separate these types of games. And like I told our team, I mean, we're going to have to earn the right to potentially come back here. And it's not going to be easy, and we got to put in the work. And but I'm confident in the resiliency of our group, and that they're going to continue to fight and push each other to get better and stay connected, because I do think we have a pretty good football team.
So this is like one of those memes where he won the toss, he won the toss, but deferred, started off slow, and then wondered why they started off so slow. Hello, McFly. The reason you started off so slow is because you didn't accept the toss. You got your offense out of sync like it's been every single week. The camera crew cut to shots of Jordan Love standing on the sidelines at the beginning of the game, wondering what he was doing. Just standing there with his arms folded, looking bored, looking kind of like, when am I going to get to go on the field? As the Detroit Lions had a long, methodical first opening drive down the field and put up some points, right? And the Green Bay Packers, their offense just was not revved up out the gates. And what do? They go punt and punt. And lo and behold, what ends up happening? The Detroit Lions go up 10-0. And do you know what the Green Bay Packers record is the last 2 years under Matt LaFleur? When they trail at any point in a game by more than 7 points. They were 1-8. Now they are 1-9. When they trail by more than 7 points. We're not talking about a massive deficit to overcome. We're literally talking 8 or more points at any point in the game. They just aren't built to overcome that, or they aren't coached well enough to overcome that. I mean, it was close. They obviously could have won the game last night, but it was their own fault for falling behind. And for some reason, I think because of what Dan Campbell did the prior week in taking the toss, Green Bay thought, well, we can get them, we can make them think that they're not going to start with the ball and that we are going to start with the ball, but all of a sudden we'll stick their offense out there first and we'll know that we're going to do that, but they won't know. Like this overthinking of that situation. And I wrote in my 2024 football preview book in the Green Bay Packers chapter, since Matt LaFleur took over the Green Bay Packers in 2019, they are 34-6. That's 86% when leading at the half. But when trailing at the half, they are 11-18. That's 38%. One of the largest splits of any team in the NFL. Also, I noted that, how they got on that run, and we'll talk a little bit more about that run momentarily, down the stretch last season, and they won those games and went on a roll into the playoffs after having a bad record. Beginning in week 11 last year, on every single road game, When the Packers won the toss, they elected to receive the ball. There was one game where they screwed up because Jair Alexander made the wrong decision there at midfield, and Matt LaFleur got really mad at him. But every single game this year, except for one, when Jordan Love was injured, when the Packers won the toss, they elected to receive the ball. In this particular game, they did not elect to receive the ball. And I'm not quite sure why they went with that move, but it got them in a hole. It put their offense on the bench cold, and they punted their first two drives, and they're used to starting fast. This is poor coaching, in my opinion. It was a strategy that backfired, obviously, and I don't really understand why they did that. I hope that they continue to be aggressive early in the games. They know how their bread is buttered. They've got to come out, get that football, start fast on offense, put the other team in a hole. Now, I've got another topic that's related to the Green Bay Packers, so let's get into that one. So what I did not understand yesterday, and I guess it's not really going to be, looking back on it, I think it could be a problem as you move forward. And that is this Jordan Love and the whole strategy of the Green Bay Packers as it relates to their offense. So I think they need to get Jordan Love going a little bit here, especially as they're heading on the road to the playoffs. I understand that they feel great about having this workhorse running back in Josh Jacobs. I also understand that they want to be built to win games in inclement weather late in the season when it's cold or windy or rainy or these types of things. But here's one fact. When the Green Bay Packers go to the playoffs, which they're obviously going to the playoffs as a wild card team right now probably, and they're going to be going on the road. They're not going to be hosting a playoff game. Most of the playoff teams in the NFC that they're going to be facing, and thus like the only teams that they're going to be dealing with, because the Super Bowl is obviously in a dome as well, are dome teams or warm weather teams. We're talking about the Minnesota Vikings, the Detroit Lions, the Atlanta Falcons if they get their dome team, potentially the Tampa Bay Buccaneers if the Tampa Bay Bucks are able to win, or the Saints, they're also a dome team. We're talking about two dome teams and a team from Florida. And then the Rams from the West, that's a dome team, or the Arizona Cardinals, that's a dome team, or the Seattle Seahawks, where it's obviously very unlikely to be actually snowing or having horrendous weather there. There's sometimes a little bit of rain, but other than a little bit of rain, it's usually not like Green Bay over on the West Coast, even in Seattle. You don't need to be this team that doesn't throw the ball hardly at all and runs the ball and tries to win these high variance games where one turnover could screw everything up, right? Where you are winning by margins of 3 points or 6 points, and it's this close, tight, nip and tuck game where you have to hope the other team fails on a fourth down, or you may not win, or you have to hope that the other team throws a pick six or gives you a good turnover to set you up in field position, or you may not win. You want to be winning these games a bit more comfortably. And in order to do that, you have to be a lot more explosive. If we look at Jordan Love, since week 8, they've played 6 games. He's averaging just 16 completions per game. 16 completions per game since week 8. That is an extremely low number. His completion rate is only 64%. He's only thrown 6 touchdowns, and they have 3 interceptions. You could say that's a great margin. It's not really a great margin, especially when I share what he did down the stretch last season. So down the stretch last season, from week 11 onward, to close out their 2023 season and roll into the postseason, Jordan Love had 25 completions per game. He averaged 35 pass attempts per game. He was completing 70% of his passes, and he had an 18-1 touchdown to interception ratio. He's sitting in nearly the same number of games, 6 touchdowns versus 18 passing touchdowns. Now, the reason that I'm suggesting that you need to get Jordan Love going in these games is partially because the run game hasn't been all that stellar. It's great down in the goal line. That's true. Listen to the numbers that the Packers are averaging with Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs, in particular, his rushing yards per game over the last 4 games. 4.2 yards per carry, 4.1 yards per carry, 2.3 yards per carry, and yesterday 3.7 yards per carry. These are not good numbers. These are not efficient numbers. He'll generally have one nice longer run, and the rest of it is a lot of unproductive rushing that sets up a third down situation where you're having to move the ball or convert the ball on third down. And I don't want to say it's shades of, but like it's pointing from the direction of like a super efficient attack with a good quarterback to like we're starting to point a little bit more in like Bobby Slowick, Houston Texan direction with what they're doing with CJ Stroud. And that's not a direction you want to aim your mark for at all. So even in games where the weather has been fine, we are not seeing a high yards per carry from Josh Jacobs, and we are not seeing efficiency out of Jordan Love, and we aren't seeing a lot of usage out of Jordan Love in the passing game. And only one wide receiver over the last 6 games has more than 250 yards. That means 250 yards might sound like a lot. Basically, what it means is you're averaging over 40 yards per game. It means that the rest of his wide receivers are averaging less than 40 yards per game. And the bigger picture, if we zoom out a little bit here, is that when you get to the playoffs and you're playing these games, you're playing against good teams. And you need your quarterback to feel like he is in a good situation, like he is lubed up, like he is ready to go, like he is clicking with a lot of his receivers. Because guess what? Somebody might take away Christian Watson that you're playing. Somebody might be able to match him up or remove him in some capacity from the game. You got to have that chemistry ready to roll with your other receivers. And right now, Jordan Love does not have any of that chemistry at all. You may run into a team where they get a lead on you, and all of a sudden you have to rely more on your passing game. You can't just hand the ball off in the fourth quarter to run out the clock with a running back. You have to be passing the ball. And if you're not ready to do that, you're going to struggle. This is why a guy like I was always favoring a team like Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs is because they come out passing. Their modus operandi, their status of offense is we're going to pass the football. And what that allows them to do then is if they get down by 7 points or 10 points at any point in the game, it's just like a normal day for them, rolling out of bed and getting their slippers on and walking to the bathroom. It's a normal situation for them to come out and just pass the ball. But for a team that's relying a lot on the run game and doesn't have a smooth passing game honed in, all of a sudden now you got to go pass heavy. It's probably not going to go as well. So in my opinion, the Green Bay Packers need to start looking ahead to the playoffs. They need to start realizing that we're probably going to make the playoffs and we're going to be on the road. We've got to get Jordan Love feeling comfortable and cranked up here and have a higher efficiency passing attack and get a lot more of these wide receivers engaged, whether it's Wicks, whether it's Reed, whether it's Dobbs, who missed the game yesterday. We've got to get these guys a little bit more, that chemistry built up a little bit more like it was last year for Jordan Love and the Green Bay Packers. So a few concerns that I have there with this strategy that they've leaned into with Josh Jacobs. It's lovely to have this guy, and it's okay to lean on him when you're playing in a blizzard, but you need to get Jordan Love cranked up because you're going to be playing in good situations from a weather perspective in the postseason due to where you're going to be playing these games. You better have Jordan Love ready to roll. Okay, let's go over to Ryan, and let's talk about some of these conference championship games. I'm really looking forward to Ryan's analysis. Actually, some of you guys may be part of our college props package from a player props perspective, and Ryan got involved early on, giving us a bet that he likes there, and I'm going to ask him to talk a little bit about that as he breaks down his first game for us, which is actually tonight, and that is the Mountain West Championship game. The winner here will secure a conference title and a berth in the inaugural college football playoff. You got Boise State entering the game on a 10-game winning streak, including a 40-20 win over UNLV in last year's conference championship game. The UNLV trots out this go-go offense, and they've got a dynamic dual-threat quarterback. I want you to talk a little bit about what he's going to bring to the table, Ryan. I'm sure you are looking forward to this game tonight. And you're looking to back the underdog in what is going to be a frigid game in Idaho tonight. You're looking to take UNLV plus the points. Show us why that's a good bet.
Yeah, I'm taking UNLV against the spread in this game, and a big reason why is their run defense, which obviously you need if you're going to go up against Genty and Boise State. And we've seen these two teams play against each other earlier this year, and it was a close game. And UNLV's run defense in that game actually locked down Genty better than any other team on their schedule this year, and that includes the number one team in the country, the Oregon Ducks. Genty ran all over Oregon. You would think they could run all over anybody, but UNLV bottled him up pretty good. I want to run through a few numbers from that game. In that game, he averaged a season low 3.9 yards per attempt on 20 of his 30 carries. He was stopped for 3 or fewer yards. But the stat that really impressed me the most had to do with how UNLV lined up to stop him. You might think that for them to shut him down, that they were stacking the box at a high rate and just daring Boise State to throw the ball to beat them. They actually kind of did the opposite. They stacked the box less than most of the teams. Genty has faced a stacked box at a 68% rate against everybody else on their schedule combined, but only 52% against UNLV. And when Genty ran into a light box against the Rebels, he only averaged 4.1 yards per attempt. Against everybody else into a light box, he averaged 8.6 yards per attempt, more than double what he did against UNLV. So UNLV had so much confidence in their run defense that they said, we're just going to come out and play our base defense, which is lining up with a light box at a pretty high rate. And we still think we can stop you. And for the most part, they did. Genty was not the primary reason they won that game. Now, he still had a good game. He's Genty, one of the best running backs in college football history at this point. But they turned him from one of the greatest of all time into just kind of your average good starting running back. And now Boise State won that game. They won 29-24. So if this 4.5-point spread were the same, like that would be enough to cover. But Genty wasn't really the difference. Like I said, the difference in that game was actually at the very end of the first half. UNLV threw an interception deep in their own territory. It set Boise State up for a 1st and goal from the 7-yard line with under a minute to go in that first half. Basically, they spotted them 7 points heading into halftime. Despite that, UNLV still held a fourth quarter lead in that game, and it was basically a toss-up game. If you take out that one interception, this was an evenly matched game that UNLV absolutely had a chance to win. Now, turnovers happen. It could happen again, but it really has not been an issue for UNLV this season. So I don't think Boise State can lean on that and expect that to keep them in the game again. UNLV actually has those 3rd fewest turnovers in all of college football. They rank 8th in turnover differential this season. So this is a really disciplined football team that protects the ball. I think that was just sort of a fluke. We talk about turnover luck sometimes. I think that's a perfect example of it. It's just not a mistake that they've made at any other point this season. So I think UNLV protects the ball in this game. I think they more or less shut down Genty as much as you can with Genty. I think they've got a great chance to win this game outright.
So talk to us, Ryan, a little bit about your rushing yards prop and why you think it's Williams is set up to have a great day on the ground against them. And obviously, as people who maybe not as familiar with the college prop market need to be aware of, sacks count as negative yardage for quarterbacks from a rushing prop perspective. In the NFL, a sack does not hurt your rushing yardage, but from a college perspective, it does. So talk to us a little bit about why you like Williams over his rushing yardage.
Yeah, I believe this prop's available at 62.5 yards. He's cleared that well over half the time this season. In fact, cleared it by a lot. He's got a few 100-yard rushing games. And like you said, sacks count as negative rushing yards in college football. So that's one of the risks. In this game against Boise State last time, he was sacked 6 times. So obviously that's a risk that he could lose a lot of yardage. But despite those 6 sacks, he still had a 100-yard rushing game against Boise. This is a bad Boise defense when it comes to containing mobile quarterbacks. If you took out the sacks in that game, he actually had 147 rushing yards. So if he just does something close to that and also cuts down on the sacks a little bit, Boise State's got a good defense, but they're not the type of team that comes out and puts up 6 sacks on the board week after week. So especially against a mobile quarterback. So I don't think that you should assume that there's going to be 6 sacks working against you in this case. Maybe 2 or 3, that could happen. But at the rate that Williams is running and clearing this number with ease against a defense that does not defend mobile quarterbacks very well, this seems like a really easy number that I would expect him to fly past.
All right, so that's another bonus bet for you guys. And by the way, Ryan, he went 2-1 last week. What is he on the show now? He's flying through his record here. I didn't introduce it properly, but where are we at? Let me find my sheet here. I want to say you're 21 and 15, 58% on the show. So having a great season. And of course, it's concluding with this championship weekend, which, by the way, is a great time to tease, Ryan. In a couple of weeks on a Tuesday show, we're going to be welcoming Ryan in for a very, very special edition of the Sharp Football Show, where we are going to walk through the bracket of the college football inaugural playoff in the college football bracket. And we're going to be picking teams and winners and moving all the way through, just like they do in the Final Four selection show when that tournament comes around and they go through that with all the hosts on there. Ryan's going to be working through the bracket with us live on a show. Really looking forward to that. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to have some great graphics from our graphical team here. It's going to be a lot of fun. But we're concluding the regular season here with these championship games. And now let's move over to the Big Ten championship, Ryan, which is going to be a lot of fun as well. We've got Oregon versus Penn State. Oregon enters this game as the only remaining undefeated team in college football, having secured their first undefeated regular season since 2010. Dylan Gabriel and offense is averaging nearly 49 points per game, but Penn State's defense is holding opponents to just 15.7 points per game. Not only does the winner claim the Big Ten title, but also a first-round bye in the college football playoff. Ryan, why do you like Oregon on the money line in this one? And also I want to know, when you get to it, why the money line versus laying the points there. I'm sure you're going to talk about it, but let's talk a little bit about the Big Ten championship.
Yeah, I certainly lean Oregon against the spread, but I prefer to play the money line in this game. It has a lot to do with James Franklin and how Penn State has fared in this type of game. Obviously, this type of game in years past has mostly been the Oregon or the Ohio State and Michigan games for Penn State. And in those games, we've typically seen Penn State kind of be competitive. If you just looked at the final score of those games, you might assume that they were hanging around, like the Ohio State game this year. 7-point win for Ohio State. Seems like it was probably a close game if you didn't watch it. That game was never in doubt. Ohio State controlled that game from start to finish. Same thing in the Ohio State game the previous year for Penn State. Same thing with a bunch of the Michigan games in recent years. They're always like kind of hanging around just enough to make you think that maybe a play or two here and there, they could get back into it and win the game. But it never happens. They're never actually on the verge of controlling one of those games. And so in this game against Oregon, I think it's the same thing that we've seen against those Michigan and Ohio State games in the past. I think that it wouldn't shock me if Penn State hung around. If Oregon won this game 24-21 or something like that, I wouldn't be shocked. But what would surprise me is James Franklin finding a way to win a close game against a good team, because we just haven't seen him do that. He's been at Penn State for a long time. He's 3-19 against teams that finish the season ranked in the top 10. He just doesn't knock off these teams very often. And the main reason for that, I think, is he's just not a good game day coach. I think Penn State fans, if there's any Penn State fans listening, they'd probably be the first to agree with me there. It's one of the great weaknesses. He's built up a really good program. They're always right there knocking on the door of the top 10, and they could probably get there year after year if he could just improve some of his decision-making. His fourth down decision-making is really inconsistent. His clock management is atrocious and has cost them games in the past. So in one of these games that if they win, it's going to be a tight game. I just can't trust James Franklin to make the right decisions and actually win a close game against a competent team, especially with a very good coach, a good game management type of coach on the other side, and Dan Lanning. Now, in terms of this particular matchup, one of the concerns I wanted to raise for Penn State is the fact that they're going to be without their right tackle, Anthony Donko. Nolan Rucci is going to be filling in for him. He's played a few times. Donko has dealt with different injuries throughout the year, so we've seen Rucci a few times. We have enough of a sample size to sort of gauge what the difference is between those two. It's probably going to hurt their pass protection, but the big issue here, I think, is in the run game, because Donko has been fantastic as a run blocker on the right side, and they've really leaned that direction quite a bit. Looking at some of these stats as far as like how he handles his blocking assignments in the run game, when they run behind Anthony Donko, only 9.5% of carries get bounced outside the design gap. So basically 90% of the time they run behind Donko, the play is executed as it's designed, that he's doing his job. They're running the play as it's supposed to be run. When they've run behind Rucci, however, only 22, or they have a 22% bounce rate. So basically 1 out of every 5 plays is not working as designed because he's not doing his job. And their running back is then having to bounce to the outside, try to find an alternate hole to run through. And that's really been an issue for them. Donko's rate leads the Big Ten, ranks 3rd in the country among all right tackles. Donko obviously drastically different down near the bottom. So that's going to be a really big drop off, especially going up against a good and a deep Oregon defensive front. They've got the depth. They've actually gotten healthier as the year has gone on. Jordan Birch, one of their top defensive linemen, was active in the last game. He's going to be fully healthy. He's dealt with injuries throughout the year. So this is really one of the strongest points of the season that Oregon's defense has been in terms of health, the opposite way for Penn State. So I think that area, combined with the fact that we've just seen James Franklin in these types of games year after year and he never comes through, I won't be shocked if it's a close game, but I'd be very surprised if Penn State finds a win. So give me Oregon on the money line.
All right, now we've got another massive game. All these games are going to be great. I hope you guys have some time set aside where you can watch these, and we don't have as many games going on at the same time. So great viewing on Saturday as we get ready for the Sunday slate of the NFL. We've got the SEC championship game between Georgia and Texas. These two teams met earlier this season. Georgia defeated then number one Texas 30-15 in Austin. In that game, Georgia's defense absolutely stifled Texas's offense, limiting it to those 15 points. Georgia's offense, however, themselves have faced challenges, particularly running the football, where they only rank 101st rushing the football, and they're off this insane, which I don't know if you stayed up to see the whole conclusion of that game, Ryan. I sure as heck did. It was a shit show. The eight overtime win over Georgia Tech last Friday. So I don't know, they're like on a game and a half at least here, but they do have one extra day of rest. Why do you like the Texas Longhorns in this one?
Yeah, this has a lot to do with the Texas defense. We talked about it just last week when we took Texas against Texas A&M. I said, I think Texas is probably the best defense in the country, and they go out and they pitch a shutout against A&M. The only points A&M scored was on a pick six. I think they could do that type of thing to Georgia again in this matchup, because if I want to look back on that game a little bit, because Georgia won that game 30-15. Again, if you didn't watch the whole game, you might think that Georgia really dominated, but it was really all about the defense and some untimely turnovers for Texas, which obviously that could happen again, but the way in which it happened and set Georgia up for such short fields time after time, it just kind of had a fluky feel to it in that first half, because Georgia jumped out to a 23-0 lead, dominant first half on the scoreboard. Their longest scoring drive in that first half was 36 yards. You don't build 23-0 leads by 36-yard scoring drives very often. It's just not going to happen again. Aside from those short fields that they got, Texas's defense was dominant. Georgia had 8 drives starting inside their own 40-yard line in that game and only produced 7 points. So if Texas just protects the football, that's a wildly different game, which they'd probably win even, just because their offense was actually a little bit better against Georgia's defense if you take away the turnovers. Now, I know some people might roll their eyes saying take away the turnovers. Obviously, they happened. Georgia's got a good defense. It could happen again. But like I said, the fact that they happened so close to the Texas goal line, that's what we're talking about with turnover luck. Like, you just don't build 23-0 leads without having some sustained scoring drives very often, especially against good teams. Now, I think one of the ways Texas can ensure that they don't run into that situation and they are not turning the ball over, that they can protect the ball in this matchup, is by leaning on the run game more. In that previous meeting, they made a change at running back. That was the first start of the year for Trey Wisner, taking over for Jadon Blue, who had taken over for CJ Baxter, who was their superstar running back, was injured in preseason, lost for the year. We haven't seen him at all. Wisner has now established himself as a starter. He's been fantastic, especially the past couple of weeks. He ran all over Texas A&M, a good Texas A&M defense last week. So he is hitting his stride at the right moment. In that matchup against Georgia in the first time around, he was still just getting eased into this role. I think it makes a big difference that he has now had a little bit more experience. But the main reason why I think Texas can run the ball is 2 weeks ago against UMass, Georgia lost defensive tackle Kristen Miller, their best defensive lineman, at least in terms of defending the run. He only played 11 snaps in that game against UMass, and then he was lost for the game. UMass then started running the ball all over the Georgia defense. This is UMass. If you're not a diehard college football fan, you probably don't know a lot about UMass. This is the worst team in all of FBS, bar none, year after year. They have not defeated an FBS opponent this season. They do have 2 wins against some bad FCS teams, but they have not defeated an FBS opponent. They were running the ball down Georgia's throat throughout that game. They finished with 264 rushing yards. And that was a competitive game well into the second half. Georgia only had a 10-point lead at one point in the third quarter against, again, one of the worst teams in all of FBS. UMass running backs against Georgia averaged 7 yards per carry. Now, you might be willing to just toss that aside and be like, yeah, Georgia didn't take them seriously enough and they got burned. That happens sometimes, right? Well, we all watched the Georgia Tech game, like you just talked about, and Georgia Tech did the exact same thing against them. Georgia Tech running backs, 6.4 yards per attempt, including 9.8 yards per attempt when they spread it out and forced Georgia into a light box. So in those two games, without their best defensive tackle, their top run stuffer, they've allowed 525 rushing yards, excluding sacks, with running backs averaging 6.8 yards per attempt. That's against UMass and Georgia Tech. Now they got to play Texas and the Texas offensive line and a running back who is peaking right at the right moment. I would not be shocked if Texas just runs the ball all over Georgia up and down the field if Miller is unable to play. Now, he's listed as questionable. There's a chance he plays in this game. It doesn't sound super likely. And even if he did get out there, I think we have to assume he's well less than 100%. He's just trying to give it a go because they desperately need him. So even if Miller goes out there less than 100%, I think Texas is going to be able to run the ball. And the primary thing that does is just help them protect the football, which they were unable to do in that first matchup. So I think Texas runs the ball on Georgia. I think they play dominant defense, and I think they actually win this game pretty easily.
All right, well, they're laying, I believe right now, 2.5 to 3 points over Georgia at the Mercedes-Benz Dome in Atlanta on Saturday afternoon. So, Ryan, we've got a comment here from Brett. He put an odds boost on Hajj to hit 100-plus yards at plus 480. So he's riding with you and us on that pick as well. And Dominic came in to say, great picks, Ryan, last week. If Auburn even had average quarterback play in the red zone, Bama probably loses that one. And that was your lone loss on the 2-1 weekend to close out the regular season there. So wish you the best of luck here in the championship round. I'm really looking forward to getting up with you very soon to go over the entire bracket. So good luck this weekend, Ryan. All right, now we are going to flip gears and talk a little bit about the NFL. And we're going to talk first and foremost about the Chicago Bears taking on the San Francisco 49ers. Obviously, the Chicago Bears, off of yet another debacle on Thanksgiving, fired their head coach. They've got a new head coach, interim head coach, obviously, and they're going to the West Coast to take on a reeling San Francisco 49ers club, which is searching for answers, is very banged up, and is probably starting to look ahead to the 2025 season, if we're being honest here. And Pam's got a best bet on this one. Let's see what Pam thinks.
For week 14 of the NFL, back the Bears as 4.5-point underdogs at the 49ers. Because momentum is on their side. Quarterback Caleb Williams has not thrown an interception in 6 games, showcasing he's starting to mature as a young quarterback. Plus, Williams has added 5 touchdowns in his last 2 outings. Williams is starting to take command of this offense, which has led to the Bears having narrow losses to top teams like the Lions, the Packers, and the Vikings. And now with the firing of head coach Matt Eberflus, that could spark a new coach effect boost. Not to mention, extra rest after Thanksgiving means fresh legs and detailed game planning. The 49ers are decimated right now, struggling with injuries and offensive inconsistencies. It's a perfect time for the Bears to capitalize and potentially even pull off an upset. Take the Bears plus 4.5 at San Francisco because they could be a team that's on the verge.
All right, so we got the Bears as one of her favorite bets this week, and you can read her entire analysis for that game over on sharpfootballanalysis.com. Pam's analysis is up there. Now let's go to one of her other best bets, and that is on another dog, this time a significantly larger dog on Sunday afternoon.
Hold your nose for this one. Bet the Panthers plus 12.5 at Eagles for NFL Week 14. Are the Panthers good? Carolina is showing signs of life, pushing the Chiefs to a 3-point game and taking the Buccaneers to overtime. This team is far more competitive as of late. Bryce Young is finally finding his groove, throwing for 298 yards, a passing touchdown, and a rushing score against Tampa. His confidence is growing at the perfect time. Carolina's defense has been a revelation, racking up 9 sacks in their last 2 outings, including 5 against Patrick Mahomes. 12 points is a massive spread in the NFL, too big for a Panthers team playing with a renewed fire and focus. With a rising quarterback, a relentless defense, and plenty of value in the number, Carolina has what it takes to cover plus 12.5 against the Eagles, even if it is a backdoor, especially against a Philadelphia team that is coming off a huge win against Baltimore. Back the dog, bet Carolina plus 12.5 at.
And last but not least, we do have one other futures bet from Pam that she likes in this topsy-turvy. Who knows what's going to happen? Very close, but no team is really outstanding. NFC South division. Let's see what Pam thinks is a great future bet for the NFC South.
The Tampa Bay Buccaneers at plus 110 to win the NFC South is looking like a solid wager. The Bucs and the Falcons are tied at 6-6, but Tampa is on an upward trend, winning their last 2 games, while Atlanta has dropped 3 straight. If you look at Tampa's schedule, it looks really good. They're favored against the struggling Raiders this week, and their remaining games more winnable than Atlanta's. The Falcons are dogs to the Vikings in Week 14, and later get Offensive Rookie of the Year favorite in Jaden Daniels. Speaking of quarterbacks, Kirk Cousins has been underperforming, throwing 5 interceptions in his last 5 games. It's starting to really hurt the Atlanta offense. The Falcons got the tiebreaker for now, but one slip-up could change everything. Bottom line, Bucs at plus 110 is value. They've got momentum, an easy schedule, and a shot at taking the division.
All right, so we got 2 dogs plus a future for you from Pam this week. Good luck on those bets, Pam. We'll see you at the window, hopefully. Let's now pivot a little bit and talk about the referees. But before we do that, I do want to mention a little bit of a special that we've got going over at Sharp Football Analysis. We are using the code SHOW20, and you can get 20% off anything on the website with this code. And we've already reduced our prices for the rest of the season. So prices are down. We just dropped them this week. And now you can use this code and get 20% off anything, whether you want to join for weekly or rest of the regular season. This is usually the time of the year where we turn things up and have a little bit of strong success to close out the regular season. $100 better on the year is up over $12,000. So we're stacking up the wins as we've gone on here. It's been a great season, our most profitable season ever. So make sure that you're going to get a couple of longest props from me on this show. Well, at least one. Again, keep my fingers crossed. I keep refreshing. Every time somebody else is speaking on the show, I'm checking the line, seeing if some of these things were posted as I want them. But I've got one for you for sure. But if you want something more than just a couple of longest bets that are hitting 68% on this show, you want to get a little bit more action, make sure that you use code SHOW20 and you can do that. All right, let's bring in Joe Gibbs, and we're going to talk a couple of games here. First of all, Joe, I want to get your thought process on this. Before we get into breaking down some of the games with you, you mentioned that you did not love, quote unquote, love the card this week. So talk to me first a little bit about what your thoughts are on like what makes for an intriguing card from a referee perspective. Is it that you're finding a good angle to bet on, or is it merely that you're finding an interesting angle from a story or narrative perspective about tendencies of a certain ref and how they match up with certain teams that they're being paired with?
Well, it's a combination of the two. I mean, obviously you want to have intriguing games that the general public care about, even if they're not a fan of that team. I mean, you look at the games this week, and I mean, the Jets, Dolphins. I mean, at the start of the season, that was a big game, but it's games. There are some officiating angles with all those games, like Sean Hockley's on the Jets and the Dolphins. Like, there are angles with that game, but it's such a garbage game that, like, I don't know if Jets and Dolphins fans care about them, let alone me or you. So it's really just the quality of the games. But if we look forward to next week, there's some fantastic games on the board. It just so happens that this week they're not very good.
I don't disagree at all there on that. Let's get to the first game, Joe. We're going to talk about the Chargers at the Chiefs. We've got Bill Vinovich on the call for that one. An important game on Sunday Night Football in Kansas City. What do you like about that one?
Bill Vinovich, he lets them play. And there's one area that he really lets slide, and that's offensive holding. And the reason that's important, as you know, the Kansas City Chiefs, that's their number one issue from a penalty perspective is offensive holding. It has been the past few seasons, and it is again this season. They're ranked second in the league in that category. I'll give you some numbers here. 34% of the Chiefs' overall penalties are in one category, offensive holding. Okay, so to put that in perspective, the rest of the league in that category, 19.2% of their penalties are via offensive holding. So it's a major issue for the Chiefs, but the Vinovich crew ranked 16th out of 17 crews calling this. So essentially, an area that's a problem for Kansas City disappears when Vinovich officiates their game. And one of them, the 49ers, back February. And he called 0 offensive holding penalties on 5 games the Chiefs have had with Bill Vinovich. 3 offensive holding penalties in 5 games, which is way below their average with everybody else. So the Chiefs get a referee they've had a lot of success with. In the Mahomes era, they're 8-2 straight up with him, including their 2 Super Bowl victories over San Francisco. The other part would be that the Vinovich crew, you know, they're going to let them play. It lets the Chiefs get away with a little bit more than they probably normally would with some other officiating crews, although everybody seems to think they get all the calls to begin with. Everybody's writing Kansas City off, and if you look at their last 3 games, they played 3 games in the space of 12 days or 13 days. So they've had a little bit of a mini bye here. The Chargers don't impress me, and I don't know if the Chargers have the offensive wherewithal to really take advantage of a Kansas City defense that's been a little shaky the past few weeks. So I really like Kansas City on Sunday night.
Oh, yeah, Kansas City has been bet to a -4 favorite as we currently sit here on Friday afternoon. All right, let's get to the next game. Joe, I got some interesting things to talk about with this game as well. We've got the Atlanta Falcons taking on the Minnesota Vikings, and you've got Alex Kemp on the call for this one. Alex Kemp is not a ref that we've spoken about very much on this show, so that's great to be able to talk a little bit about what his tendencies are. Why don't you share a little bit about what you see from Alex Kemp and then how you think it pairs with this game?
Yeah, actually, he's one of my favorite referees. We haven't spoken about him much just because he hasn't been on games that really matter. Here's the thing with Kemp. He's been a referee since 2018, and every season they've called a disproportionate amount of penalties on the defense, and that hasn't changed this season. The one offensive category they've actually made more of a focus is offensive holding. They're ranked 2nd in the NFL, which is unusual for these guys, but offsetting the excessive offensive holding, they're ranked dead last for false starts. So when you combine the two together, it's really not that bad overall because those are your 2 main offensive penalty categories. And these teams aren't overly penalized in that anyway. Another angle is the Kemp crew, just over 60% of their offensive holding penalties on the road teams. So that doesn't bode well for Atlanta. But let's get to the defensive side of the ball. And I've had to write all these down because there's so many. The Alex Kemp crew, number 1, defensive holding, number 1, illegal contact, number 1 for face masks, number 3 for roughing the passer, and number 3 for illegal use of hands, all of which have been on the defensive side of the ball. So just right there, you can see the defenses are going to have to play on the back foot with this crew. And then the other part is both teams, but particularly Minnesota, have been very good at generating those defensive pass interference penalties and defensive holding penalties. And so I kind of like the over more than anything. I wrote this game this week, and I said Minnesota's probably the play from a side perspective. But honestly, I think the over is probably the play. This crew is 55% to the over in their career. You know, and they're going to be throwing the ball. If Minnesota's smart, that Atlanta secondary is not great, and that's where they're going to have their success is throwing the ball. And then a byproduct of that is just some of these defensive penalties that will help them matriculate the ball down the field at certain times of the game.
Yeah, you know, there's the interesting angle for this one, and I'll let you go, Joe, and I'll just dive into this a little bit more. But fascinating angles there. Certainly looking forward to that game because you got the Kirk Cousins revenge narrative going back to his old team in Minnesota, and you've got, you know, you always wonder who's going to have the upper hand here. Kirk went up against this defensive coordinator in practice, but the defensive coordinator certainly knows his tendencies. And then you got Kevin O'Connell, who understands what Kirk Cousins' tendencies were a lot himself, having coached him for several years, what his strengths and weaknesses are, what he liked, what he didn't like, what bothered him more than other things, and how you could sort of bait him into things. And so that's going to be an interesting angle to this one as well. So that intrigue right there as to like the cat and mouse game and who ends up having more success is going to be fascinating to me. You layer in that angle of the official liking the over potentially a little bit more here in the way that the game could be called. Certainly fascinating with regards to Kirk Cousins. So I'll talk about that more in a second. Thank you so much, Joe, for joining us. Make sure that you guys are following Joe over on X. You can follow him as well up at Sharp Football Analysis, where he shares a weekly article analyzing a couple of his biggest games in addition to trends about every single referee. As it relates to sort of, Kirk Cousins and this game in particular, what I find fascinating is we already talked about this earlier on the Tuesday show, which, just so you guys remember, for if you're new, we do a show Tuesday at noon and Friday at noon Eastern time, both days, going live on X, on YouTube. Make sure that you guys are subscribed over on YouTube. Set an alarm so that you can get a notification every time that we're going live. And in addition, be sure to give us a thumbs up. But Kirk Cousins, talked about this on Tuesday. I try to always tell you, I'm going to give you something on Tuesday that's going to be discussed a lot throughout the week. And in some cases, we might come back to it on Friday because it was just so valuable. The Minnesota Vikings use the number 2 lowest rated man coverage. They play a lot of zone. Specifically, they play a lot of cover 2 zone. Kirk Cousins has really struggled against cover 2 zone. The biggest splits in the NFL when he's dealing with 2 high. We talked about that, showed you a lot of graphics on the Tuesday show to help paint the picture there. Kirk Cousins also has struggled when he's been pressured this season, and the Minnesota Vikings have an above average pressure rate. He's the number 2 most sensitive quarterback to pressure, so that's going to be a factor there. In addition, you've got the zone blitzes that the Minnesota Vikings bring, unlike every other team in the NFL. And Kirk Cousins has not been holding up very well against zone blitzes. We'll see if he knows that it's coming here against Brian Flores and can make those adjustments. That's the cat and mouse aspect to this game. But he is throwing the ball with only 2.1 seconds when he is blitzed with zone behind it. And these passes are averaging only 6.1 air yards per attempt. Both of these marks rank very low in the NFL. The 6.1 air yards per attempt is one of the lowest in the NFL. So he's throwing it quick, he's throwing it short, and it's just going to be hard to stack yardage or matriculate the ball effectively down the field against a defense like the Vikings. We have seen some quarterbacks go up against the Minnesota Vikings who, when blitzed with zone behind it, throw the ball deeper down the field. Even like a rookie like Caleb Williams was doing it, but Jordan Love was doing it. Some of these other quarterbacks were pushing the ball down the field when being faced with the zone blitz. Kirk Cousins has not been doing that. Kirk Cousins has been, as quickly as possible, get the ball out of his hands. And that strategy typically does not fare quite as well. We have seen the Vikings defense and that secondary be gashed at times with some quarterbacks who beat the blitz and get the ball out of their hands down the field to take advantage of it. I'm really intrigued to see how that short passing is able to work for Kirk Cousins in this game against Brian Flores and Kevin O'Connell. Okay, with that said, I do want to get to, let me refresh the screen, continually refreshing the screen. And still not there for our prop number 2. So let's talk about our prop number 1, and then maybe we'll get to prop number 2 by the time we get there. So let me first, as I normally do, I'll get you guys queued up as to the book to go to here. Let's see here. Okay, the good news is this is basically everywhere. The best line, if you really want to save a cent in juice, is going to be found at Caesars or Will Hill, but it's also there at Rivers, at Pinnacle, at DraftKings, all within like 1 to 2 cents of one another. And the line is the same everywhere. So you're not going to have a problem finding or locating it at any of those spots. So I would encourage you, maybe the one spot don't go to is MGM or ESPN or Hard Rock. There you're going to be spending about 5 more cents for the same number. But if you want to save whatever penny you can, which is what I obviously like to do as well, I would head over to Caesars, DraftKings, Pinnacle. Any of those spots are going to do you right. Bet365, that's going to have it as well. And we're going to go to the Tennessee Titans, Jacksonville Jaguars game. And we're going to look at the passing props. And we're going to go to the longest completion. And we're going to bet Will Levis longest completion over 35.5. This is not a bet that you should feel comfortable with or feel great about, because it's Will Levis and it's the Tennessee Titans and this is a gross game. And I get it. A lot of people don't like even watching a game with the Tennessee Titans. They're a team that fluctuates a lot. I don't really necessarily think that this prop is going to have massive movement upwards because it's already relatively high. But I do like this one at 35.5. And let me explain a little bit why I think that we're going to see some Will Levis opportunities down the field on Sunday. Will Levis was beat up early in the season. He was working with a new offensive coordinator, and there was a lot of issues with the way that he was performing early on in the year, as a lot of you guys know. Many of you probably were betting on the Tennessee Titans if you were semi-sharp even, and you weren't having success because they would get up in these games and then Will Levis would do some dumb crap and cost them the game and cost them the cover. One of the things they weren't having a lot of success with, though, is getting Calvin Ridley involved. They weren't having a lot of success in pushing the ball down the field. And then, lo and behold, of course, we know that Will Levis gets injured. His shoulder gets hurt, I believe, in week 5, or maybe it was week 4, comes out of the bye. They try to play him a little bit in week 6. Doesn't go well. He throws for only 95 yards against the Colts because his shoulder's not good. They shut him down. They let him heal up. They bring in Mason Rudolph. Mason Rudolph plays for a few weeks. And then week 10, we get the Will Levis return. And there has been a night and day difference if you follow along with like how the coaches talk about the quarterback, especially when you've got a new offensive staff, a new offensive coach, head coach, plus his offensive coordinator. The way that they're talking about Will Levis of late is so different from how they were discussing Will Levis earlier on in the season. And there is so much more positivity right now within Tennessee and the way that they're talking about this passing attack and specifically Will Levis than there once was. But listen to this. Since Will Levis returned from that injury, he's played 4 games. 3 of the 4 have been on the road. Against the Chargers, Vikings, Texans, and Commanders is who he played. Those defenses. Against the pass, those defenses ranked number 3, number 4, number 9, and number 13. Average to above average to very good pass defenses. So it's understandable that Will Levis isn't lighting the world on fire like this Tennessee Titans offense isn't lighting the world on fire. They've been going against some really good defenses. The Jacksonville Jaguars are not a really good defense. They rank dead last in the NFL in defensive efficiency. They also play the least zone coverage of any team in the NFL. Now, if you look at what they're trending to recently, they aren't playing man at such a high rate. They're still playing man at like the 8th highest rate in the NFL, but they are playing more man than most every other team and more man than what Will Levis had been playing over the last 4 games. Will Levis is better when facing more man coverage. He has a higher completion rate. He has better accuracy. He throws a better catchable ball. And these plays have higher upside in terms of bigger splash plays, higher air yards per attempt, and a higher completion rate on them. The other thing that the Jacksonville Jaguars do very differently than these other teams is they get pressure at the number 30th rate and they blitz at the number 32nd rate. So they don't blitz very much at all. It's night and day different from what Will Levis has been playing since he returned. And he plays actually at a top 10 rate in terms of EPA per attempt and yards per attempt when he is in a clean pocket, which I believe he's about to face here on Sunday against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Is a far more clean pocket when he's playing at home in Tennessee. And Matt, I put a graphic up there if you want to pull up that graphic. So I want to show this is year to date on all downs, on all quarters, where these defenses that Will Levis has played compare to the Jacksonville Jaguars and the rest of the NFL. So he just played the Chargers and the Vikings and the Texans and the Commanders, and you could see where these teams are. Earlier this year, he played the Jets and the Bears pass defense and the Dolphins and the Green Bay Packers. All of these teams rank in that, you could draw a little bubble, sort of like a little triangle, up in the, with the exception of like the Packers, they're all headed in that direction of average to above average pressure rate, average to above average blitz rate. And then on the totally opposite end of that spectrum, where that the point of that triangle would go, is the Jacksonville Jaguars, who have the lowest blitz rate and the third lowest pressure rate. And it just seems to me that we are going to get a good situation for Will Levis to actually look good at home. He's not, like I said, and you can bring it back to me. Like I said, 3 out of the last 4 games have been on the road. They've been against brutal defenses, not just good defenses, like fundamentally sound defenses, defenses with good coaches. We're talking about the Chargers and the Vikings and the Texans and the Commanders. You think about the Texans and the Commanders, your head coach is a defensive-minded coach. Dan Quinn is getting that defense in order. You've got D'Amico Ryans for the Houston Texans, defensive-minded head coach. And then you've got the Minnesota Vikings and the Chargers. They got some great defensive coordinators there. That's not the case here with the Jacksonville Jaguars, whose defensive coordinator is the old defensive coordinator from the Atlanta Falcons. His defense isn't very good this year. He's not super creative. I didn't love him in Atlanta. I don't like him here in Jacksonville. They don't bring the pressure. They don't blitz a lot. And I think it's just going to be drastically different for Will Levis. Now, the other thing to note here on this one, I'll see if I can pull it up. Is like if we look at the last several quarterbacks to face the Jacksonville Jaguars and sort of what they did from a longest completion perspective, let's go 40 yards last week, CJ Stroud, 64 yards the week before, Jared Goff. We'll go 2 weeks prior to that, Jalen Hurts, 46 yards. Malik Willis with the Packers had a 51-yarder. Jordan Love had a 67-yarder. That's every game that they've played since late October, with one exception, and that was Sam Darnold in a very strange game down in Jacksonville. Some of those like teams where it's a northern team like the Minnesota Vikings that go to Jacksonville late in the season, like late November or onwards into December, games get a little weird. That was a 12-7 final score. And the Minnesota Vikings there and Sam Darnold did not get over that. But what I list off, like 6 other quarterbacks, maybe 5 other quarterbacks, all of those guys went well over 35.5 longest completion against them. And Will Levis is a chucker. And in addition, he's got Calvin Ridley with his revenge game against the Jacksonville Jaguars. They did not want to pay him. There were a lot of complaints about this guy can't catch a football. Now he's going back up against the Jacksonville Jaguars. He's got a shot to stick it to him. So I think that's going to be an interesting kind of narrative to this game, as well as that revenge game for Calvin Ridley. So that's one that I like. I am trying to, one last time, refresh. So we will hope that we hit that one and improve to 8-1 on our last 4 weeks. Well, it'll be last 5 weeks. I want to give you another one. Some weeks I've only given you one. I want to give you another one, but it's not posted yet. I'm just going to check one last time. One last time. Still not posted. And so we're going to hold off on that one. What I will do is this. Trying to think of the best way to get this one to you, because I did this one other week. I said I got one. The line is moving in our direction, meaning we're going to get a better number. And it was a Tua longest completion under. And I never ended up sharing it because the show ended, and I think we bet that on like Saturday or Sunday. What we're going to do is I will either go into the comments of this. Yeah, let's do that. I will go into the comments of this YouTube broadcast, and I will reply and pin the comment for the added player prop that I'm going to add here from a longest perspective. So that's a way that you guys will be able to go. If you're subscribing, you're going to get it when I release it. But as soon as I release it, after it's posted, I'll go back into the YouTube comments and make sure that I list it out there. So like I said, Ryan's doing great. Ryan is doing great. He was, 21-15 on the season for a free show, giving you guys 58% winners in college football. I'm sure you love that. I've gone 17-8. That's 68% on the show. Free winners, just passing them out to you guys so that you can bet them each week. I'm sure you guys love that as well. And then Pam has been doing great also. And last week, I want to say, I got too many sheets going on here. We know that she's on the Bears and the Carolina Panthers this week. But last week, she took the Seahawks and the under, which both of those won. And the one loss that she had the Eagles Ravens over 51 points. So from a sides perspective and totals perspective, she went 2-1 last week. I don't have her year-to-date records, and we've been giving you guys a lot of great bets here to make. So we love doing it because you guys are helping us build this show up, and we appreciate that. So please continue to support us by giving us a thumbs up, by making sure that you share some love in the comments, and sharing this with your friends, and everybody can follow along. Brett says that this is now 36.5 minus 20. Caesars has juiced it up a little bit. DK, I guess, took it down and reposted it. Like I said, if you guys feel like you didn't get in at this one, or you're watching this on replay, I don't think this one has a massively high ceiling. 35.5 for Will Levis is already pretty high. But that being said, this is just such a different matchup from those defenses, from the defensive coaching staff that he's gone up against, from being at home, from where he sits in the season. This offense is in such a different place than it was to start the season with that coaching staff. There's so many reasons that I like it from not just a vibes perspective, but the overall matchup of the game, let alone the X's and O's, right? Let alone like the details of this Jacksonville defense and what they've given up, just from the big picture side of it, that I do like this one a fair amount. Okay, let us see here. I know I forget his name, but somebody in the show wanted me to make sure that I talked about EDSR. That was on Tuesday. And of course, we didn't have time to get into EDSR. So I do want to make sure that we hit it a little bit here. A big edge this week is for the Minnesota Vikings, and is primarily on the defensive side of the ball. The Atlanta Falcons defense ranks 30th in EDSR. The Vikings defense ranks 3rd. The Vikings defense forces you into more third downs. The Atlanta Falcons defense is the opposite. You know, they're sitting back. They're trying to take away some of those big over-the-top plays, but they're letting you run the ball a little bit more successfully underneath to bypass third down because you got second and medium. They're also not as elite defending the underneath passes. So that defense is much worse. The Falcons offense is slightly worse than the Minnesota Vikings, but the real difference is in the defense there. So that's one of the edges. Another edge that is pretty substantial here, which injuries are going to derail this one for you naturally, but the Chicago Bears versus the San Francisco 49ers. San Francisco 49ers on the season have been more efficient on early downs, but now they're down multiple players. left tackle, both the running backs. Brock Purdy, is he 100%, 100%? All of these different factors going into play on that one. So that was one of the bigger mismatches. Another one here is Philadelphia, Carolina, but you're laying the 13 points there if you want to back the Philadelphia Eagles. But on both sides of the ball, they are more efficient on early downs, offensively and defensively, than are the Carolina Panthers. And last but not least is the Tennessee Titans. Tennessee Titans popping here as well, both defensively. Now, offenses are about the same. It's the defense where the Tennessee Titans defense has been better this year dramatically than the Jacksonville Jaguars on early down. So the Titans offense is going to pop a little bit more in the model this week as a result. We will see what happens with this Tennessee Titans defense, though. That effort that they gave up in Washington was quite embarrassing. I certainly wasn't expecting the Washington Commanders to have as much success on the ground against the Tennessee Titans as what they ended up having there. So I'm interested to see how that effort gets fixed, how the performance improves here against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Mac Jones obviously playing in this one instead of Trevor Lawrence. And if you look at the starts for Mac Jones, it's not as if like Mac Jones has been playing some cupcakes. So he's played some tough defenses as well. I want to say he played the Minnesota Vikings and somebody else in his starts. It's very different going up against a team that can game plan for you and attack you ahead of time. And so Mac Jones faced a couple of tough defenses in his couple of starts. Now he's going up against Tennessee. Is Tennessee going to be playing elite? Are they not? I know you got to check these injuries because there are a number of really important injuries this week for a lot of teams. This is a very important point of time. It was a joke, Exile. 100% agree. The Titans' defensive effort was a joke. It's a very important time when some teams are starting to look towards 2025. They've got players that seem healthy, that they're starting to shut down a little bit. They got players where a little injury is worth not having the guy go. You just have to be careful as you're watching some of these teams that are not necessarily in the thick of it from a playoff perspective and what their focus is over the last 5 weeks or so of the regular season. That was you, Jason. Okay, so I gave that to you. Okay, so there you go, guys. I guess that is it for week 14. We gave you a lot of college bets, a couple NFL bets, and at least one prop. We'll get into those comments when I have the other one for you when it gets released. So make sure you're over at Sharp Football Analysis, following our show, subscribing to our show, and you can get involved there. Use the code SHOW20 if you want 20% off the website this week. And with that said, good luck on all your bets this weekend. Hope the football is great and the bankroll increases.
Go,